Welcome to the MMA Fan Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Stu and Blake.
Hello, I am Blake Harrison. This is the MMA Fan Podcast. I don't know why I did it in that order. And joining me is Stuart Whiffin, who's looking slightly less tanned. Less tanned now. It's going down a bit. You're not quite as orange as you were recently. How's it going? Do you feel less Charles Oliveira, or are you still, the podcast host has a name and his name is Stu Whiffin? Is that how it goes?
I mean, I still literally look like Joey Essex next to Casper, the friendly ghost above me, because you are borderline transparent. Do you know what it is, right? I left my webcam in the office, so I'm just actually on the computer's camera today. So I think that's washed me out.
So it's a lighting issue. It's not.
Nah.
You're still as orange as you were before. It's more of a lighting issue.
I'm just like, I wouldn't say orange. I'd say bronzed Adonis.
Bronzed Adonis. Yeah. At first, I was like, "What are you saying there, Ron's?" I don't know. But yeah, no. All right, fine. It's a lighting issue. So if I see you in person, you'll still be
a bronzed Adonis.
A bronzed Adonis with bleach blonde hair at the age of 50.
It's Monday morning. How was your weekend?
Yeah, it was okay. We went to took the kids to Hever Castle yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Had a nice little trip around the grounds and all that stuff. Got bitten by mosquitoes up and down my leg, which is now driving me insane. I literally would like to take a knife and just cut off the bites. They're driving me that mad at the moment. But yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Do you think they go for the paler skin?
I think I just, I'm a tasty treat. As the kids say, I think I'm a bit of a snack. So I'm a snack, mate. So yeah, they're loving it. It's probably all the sugary food I eat so much sugary food. I eat so much. This probably my blood is probably like much sweeter than anyone else's blood because of the crap I eat. So that's probably that.
Okay.
That's the scientific analysis I'm making.
Sure.
You eat cake, your blood tastes sweeter, the insects want to bite you.
Surely that's how it works.
Spot the lie, guys. Spot the lie.
There's probably loads of nutritionists and stuff like listening to this, just
switching off.
Absolute idiots.
Absolute morons. That's why you're here. Exactly. Listen to two morons chat about what could be going down at UFC 292.
Hell of a lot of guesswork involved in this podcast.
Oh, yes, but that's why we love it. We say guesswork. I mean, hey, who is the guy that told Justin Gaethje to throw a head kick? This guy. This guy right here.
UFC 292. I think we've just put 291.
Why are you not giving me my flowers?
We don't need to talk about that. Because we discussed that on the last one. Oh, it's a good lineup this Saturday. Yeah. Do you want me to just acknowledge it one more time?
Yeah, I do.
Right,
yeah.
You called it that Justin Gaethje was going to knock out Dustin Poirier. It hurts even more because I wanted Dustin to win the belt, and I've been banging on about it for so long. That pains me. So it's a double kick in the dick. This, but yes, you called it that you wanted to see him throw more head kicks because you think it could work, and obviously that's what happened.
It did. Trevor Whitman, clearly a fan of the MMA Fan Podcast, was coaching Gaethje, told him what to do. There you go.
Stupid smug face. Tragic.
The only thing that would make it more tragic is if I had bleach blonde hair right now. That's what would make it a more tragic face.
Well, speaking of shit hair, we're here to talk about O'Malley Sterling, UFC 292. I mean, there's a few fights that didn't actually happen on this card, which I think could have made it a little bit more interesting, but I don't know. One of those fights, which we'll get to, has ended up kind of, to say every cloud has a silver lining, it certainly did on this one. But so before we let's not get bogged down in the fights that did get pulled from this. Let's start at the top because it's an exciting fight. This, right? Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling for the strap. Firstly, right, O'Malley deserves this shot, right?
Oh, it's so. I don't know. I don't know if he does. I don't know. I think he does. Maybe. Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's what we're dealing with here is we've got like two polar opposite people, not just in like their character or anything like that, but just how they've got to where they are right now. You've got a guy in Aljamain Sterling whose CV is actually looks really, really good, but the fans have never been on his side. And in a lot of ways, I would say do you know, it's a difficult one. I don't think Aljamain Sterling should get hate because none of what's happened to him has really been his fault. But I can understand why fans haven't kind of completely believed in him as a champion, because the way he got the belt was that illegal knee from Petr Yan. Then in the rematch with Yan, that fight could go either way. I feel like he did a really good account of himself, and I've rewatched it before doing this preview show. Aljamain Sterling clearly wins rounds 2 and 3 with all the back control. I think Petr Yan clearly wins rounds 4 and 5. And round 1 was a real coin flip round. So, you know, you could easily believe that Yan won that. So that means that Jan's the champ when it was the illegal knee, and then maybe he didn't beat. Sterling's the champ when Yan didn't. When he got beat by Yan, maybe even the second fight. The TJ Dillashaw, he went in there with a stupid injury, so that's not a great win. Henry Cejudo, yeah, on paper, good win, but he was out the cage for 4 years. Like, there's a lot going on with Sterling, and
it was still a split decision. It wasn't.
Was that one a split as well, the Cejudo one?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And this is a guy that's been out of the cage for 4 years and stuff. So I can understand why fans haven't given Aljamain Sterling the flowers that he may think he deserves. But equally, then you've got Sean O'Malley, who you look at his resume, and other than the Petr Yan fight, which I think he did win. A lot of people were saying he didn't win that. But again, I rewatched that for this.
Tight.
That was tight, but I think again, for me, from what I remember now, O'Malley clearly wins round 1. I gave Yan round 2, and I think I gave O'Malley round 3, which again, round 3 might have been the fight that was quite the round that was a tight round. But when you look at O'Malley's record, other than the Yan win, which again some people find controversial, I think it's a legitimate win. But other than that, he's not really got any notable wins. But he does have
against Munoz and
no contest against Munoz in a fight that Munoz I think was winning.
Yeah.
That's a note. So that's one of the biggest names he's fought other than Yan, and that was a no contest in a fight he was losing.
And
then Chito Vera, who beat him.
It's Chito, yeah.
Chito beat him. You can say what you want about, it hit maybe a nerve or, damaged the leg, whatever. Sure. But Chito won that fight. He caused the damage that made him, win that fight. So you've got a guy...
Chito Vera has gone on to fight far better opponents than what Sugar has.
100%. And O'Malley seems to have been carried through to this title opportunity by his popularity with the fans. And if you look at I think we said this before the O'Malley Petr Yan fight, there were fights in there outside of Yan, even though we thought a lot of Yan, and Yan's a very good fighter, even though things haven't gone well for him recently. There were fights in there with people that were lower down the rankings than Yan that would have been tougher for O'Malley. Some very good wrestlers, or like a Corey Sandhagen that can match him for kind of height and length and striking acumen and all that kind of stuff. That would have been, I think, tougher fights for O'Malley. So, yeah, you've got one guy that's struggling to prove that he is as good as everyone says he is. And then the other guy who, because of his popularity with the fans, has been given this opportunity that maybe arguably he didn't deserve. So it's a really interesting one.
Let's talk about that popularity. Where do you think this comes from? Because the Eddie Wineland knockout was spectacular. There was a couple of nice walk-off KOs early on in his career.
Yep.
Shit out and shocking outfits. I guess draws attention to him.
I think a younger audience is really into it. I think the kind of flashy hair, the wearing the Michael Jackson jacket with no shirt underneath,
Looked
whatever
better on
you
Mirab.
want to say.
Way better on
Look
Mirab.
way better on Mirab. I loved Mirab stealing his jacket. That was so good. But yeah, he's clearly got. I mean, I quite like O'Malley. I mean, I think he said some things maybe on podcasts and stuff that people haven't liked, and I don't know enough about that. There was something where I think his coach was talking about a female fighter and talking about her looks rather than her abilities in the cage, and it was it Megan Anderson, the former featherweight fighter?
Right.
Australian. Yeah. And so there's been some things but I think that was more his coach than him from what I remember. So yeah, there's been some stuff where I'm not a big fan of. But when it comes to the flashy looks along with the really great style, it's the fight style that does it for me. He's throwing flashy kicks. He puts on good performances. He talks a little bit as well. I think that's a guy that I can get behind. And I think that's a guy that the UFC can acknowledge is someone that could be a very, very big star for them going forward.
100%.
So, from a business point of view, it makes sense that he's got this title shot.
With that fight style in mind, right, which is essentially striking.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit how we think this fight's going to go, because I'm going to jump in first here and I'm going to say O'Malley's rangy. But I don't think I've not actually looked at the reach differences and stuff. I don't imagine they're too dissimilar. But I think that the smart Aljo is surely going to wrestle him.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like to stand there and have a dick swinging competition trying to strike with O'Malley's, I don't think a particularly smart move, and I'm sure Aljo's coaches know what his strengths are, and his wrestling is obviously great, and his BJJ solid. So I think we're going to see him obviously just try and avoid standing and striking with O'Malley, take him down, and I think he'll probably finish him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you again rewatching the Jan O'Malley fight, Jan was able to take him down relatively easily at points in that fight and control him for a long time as well. You could argue O'Malley wasn't expecting that from Jan as much as he got, but I think Sterling is a way better grappler and wrestler than Jan. So I think if Jan was able to do that to O'Malley, I think Sterling will definitely be able to do that to O'Malley. I think the smart pick is to go for Sterling. I think Sterling, just a better wrestler, will be able to implement that. And if he gets O'Malley down, we've not seen O'Malley have to use his kind of defensive jiu-jitsu enough. There's a clip going around socials at the moment of him against, is it Nakatori Gomez or someone like that, in a grappling competition, like a Polaris type grappling competition, and he got him with a guillotine. Like, great, fair play. This is different, man. This is MMA. It's Aljamain Sterling with his. He's a good MMA wrestler. He's a good wrestler overall. He's great with his jiu-jitsu. If he takes your back, you're in big trouble. Yeah, that's how I see the fight going. I see Aljo really implementing a wrestling heavy game plan and O'Malley struggling with it. However, particularly in that first round, O'Malley is a bit of a sniper. And I tell you what, you again rewatching the Sterling Petr Yan fight, Sterling has moments in his career where someone's clipped him once or twice, and defensively he turns into, I mean, look, this sounds rude of me to say, but it looks like it turns into a bit of a novice striker, because he's dipping his head ridiculously low. He's sort of flailing his arms out there. He's turning his back a little bit. Sterling doesn't deal well with people landing a couple of strikes on him, I don't think. And I think if O'Malley's power is what we believe it to be and what we've seen from the likes of the Eddie Wineland fight and stuff like that, if O'Malley clips him early, Sterling might start shooting from way out and really telegraphing those shots and getting into a bit of a panic mode. And that could really lead to O'Malley landing an uppercut or a knee that just takes Sterling out. So there's definitely a world in which O'Malley wins this fight. because I think he's landed something early and Sterling's gone into panic mode, doesn't defend the strikes well enough. But I think, if I had to gun to my head, if I've got to pick someone, I'm going for Sterling, and I'm going to say it's going to be a wrestling heavy performance where, as the rounds go on, it gets more comfortable for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there could potentially be a lot of booze in that auditorium that night.
If it's a big O'Malley crowd there, and Sterling's taking him down and not getting a huge amount of damage off, but controlling the position a lot, we could get a lot of booze on that one, I think. Particularly because, and we'll get onto it in a minute, the co-main event may also go slightly similar. So I think that if the crowds add, towards 50 minutes of that, there's definitely going to be a lot of booze ringing out and around the place. Before we move on to anything else, it looks like, win or lose, Aljamain Sterling is probably moving up in weight. How do you think that plays out for him up at featherweight?
Well, what I think the most important thing it does is, if he moves up, then is he going to vacate the belt or go for 2 weights? Well, I don't know what he's going to do insofar as that. But if it does mean that he vacates that belt and it gives an option for Merab to fight for the belt, if O'Malley puts on a good performance in this fight, or even if O'Malley wins this fight, the media is going to jump all over Merab in his jacket, and it's a fight that's going to get made, I think.
I might have a counter argument to that coming up. But
right.
remember that I might have I agree with you, and I think that's a high possibility. However, there's some outcomes that could take place on this night that pushes Merab a bit back down the pecking order. But anyway, Sterling at featherweight, what are you thinking? Do you think he troubles Volk?
No chance. That's a naughty division to start fucking around in, and and I think I'll be very cautious, because you look at fighters like Volk and Harry held his own, or Harry coped with the wrestling and that of Makachev. He weren't troubled by that, and I think someone like Aljo, I think if he wrestles him, Volk's not going to be fazed by that, and then Volk will be back on his feet, and I've got a feeling that he'd quite comfortably completely outstrike and I think it'd be too much. The way that Volk's fight style doesn't lend itself to Aljo, and if he went up, would he get a shot straight away? Possibly.
Yeah, if he wins, I think he does. I think the next fight for Volk is probably going to be Topuria.
Yeah.
But if Aljo wins, I think whether he vacates, he's got more of a chance of going straight for the belt if he keeps hold of the belt. But I think the plan has been to vacate to allow Merab to fight for it. But we'll see. But if he can keep hold of the belt for a bit and go up, I think it's very possible that he fights Volk in his next fight. But again, we know Volk wants the Makachev fight. Everyone wants to move up, become a double champ. So we'll see.
Why do you think Aljo's not a fan favourite? Because he's not desperate to be. I mean, when you watch DC in his fights, and he just wanted to be like so bad, it was embarrassing. And I
did like DC.
I'm
not gonna. I like DC.
Absolute helmet. But it was like he didn't do anything wrong, DC. But he just didn't have star quality that the fans got excited about. And it bothered his ego, and he just tried to so many times endear himself, and he couldn't do it. I'm just thinking at DC now. But Aljo,
I think with DC, it was more his fight style in some fights, like the way he just laid on Anderson Silva when Anderson Silva came in at short notice and all that kind of stuff. I think that also everyone seemed to love John Jones, and DC was just highlighting the fact that John Jones is not a nice human being. And a lot of fans didn't like that because they just loved John Jones because his in-cage performances were so good. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I did like DC, because I wasn't a massive Jones fan, and he was calling Jones out for stuff. I mean, when you look at
Aljo doesn't do this. Aljo just he turns up, 9-fight win streak, like, puts on, solid enough performances, and as looking like he's
they're not great though. Like
no, they're not great. But
if we look at Aljo's run, if you look at Aljo's run, I can't remember the decision win over Munoz, but I bet that wasn't overly exciting. The Sandhagen win was phenomenal. To beat Corey Sandhagen in the fashion that he did was absolutely fantastic. To get him in the first round, take his back, it choked him out. Yeah. That was phenomenal. But really well done there. Then he fights for the belt. He got pieced up in that fight. He came out really fast in the first round, won the first round, then completely gassed out. And Jan was playing with him. Jan was tripping him up and playing with him and just piecing him up. And Sterling had nothing. Then Jan does probably the dumbest thing to ever happen in a mixed martial arts fight. It's probably one of the dumbest things to ever happen in combat sports, particularly looking back on how Petr Jan's career has gone since that illegal knee and the losses he's had recently and all that stuff. And the fact that he's never reclaimed like a full, I know he was an interim champ, but he's never reclaimed a full title. It's got to be one of the dumbest things to ever happen inside the cage, throwing that illegal knee in such a big fight, in a fight that he was so comfortably winning. And then Aljo fights Jan again, as we mentioned. It was a close fight. And I'll tell you what, the 2 rounds that Sterling won were pretty boring. Like, he just body triangle and had the back and was looking for the choke a bit, but it wasn't like the most exciting rounds in the world that he won there. Again, Dillashaw, not his fault, but that win doesn't have a huge amount of legitimacy to it in my eyes. Cejudo, good win. There's so much content. I can't remember fights unless I've watched them really recently. Was the Cejudo fight particularly exciting?
No, not at all.
I can't really remember it. I can't really remember if it was that exciting.
Well, if you can't remember it,
and it was a split.
It wasn't exciting.
True. Yeah, and so split decision over Henry Cejudo, who was out of the cage for 4 years. Yeah, I can see why people are a bit like, oh, I don't consider him a real champ. Oh, he's not that great. Like, it feels harsh to say that. And I wouldn't say it, but I can understand why other people would say it. And there's definitely, if you look at his resume closely, there's definitely things where you can go, oh, well, it's not. If you just look at the names, it looks phenomenal. If you just say Munoz, Sandhagen, Jan, Dillashaw, Cejudo, that's someone that could be one of the greatest bantamweight champs of all time. He could surpass Dominic Cruz. But when you really dig deep into how those fights were won, it doesn't hold as much weight. And that's just the truth of the matter. That's just it. So, and also he didn't do himself any favors when he won the belt via the illegal knee to then be posing around with it and kind of playing the villain a little bit. Because had he gone the route of like a Justin Gaethje, who when he won an interim title just threw it to the floor and was like, not interested in that, I want the real belt. That would have, I think, ingratiated him more to the fan base, but he didn't do that. Okay. So, yeah.
So you think, I think we both agree that this has got potential to be a bit of a dull fight for a casual, if it does mean that he's just Aljo.
Yeah.
So
it's the opening exchange is going to be, I mean, what I would say is, for someone that is more of a hardcore fan, I think this is a fantastic fight. And I think the strategies and who can implement their tactics and stuff like that, those things are going to be really, really fascinating to watch. How does Sterling's quite rangy anyway, really, but how does Sterling get in on O'Malley and get that takedown? How does O'Malley stop that from happening, but still land those power strikes that could really rattle Sterling? I think that's going to be fascinating. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. But if Sterling gets his way very early, I think we could be seeing a situation where if O'Malley's defensive jiu-jitsu is okay, then we might be seeing a situation where it's just, body triangle for 5 minutes, break, body triangle for 5 minutes. But we'll have to wait and see. If O'Malley's defensive jiu-jitsu is not up to scratch, then we're going to see an early submission from Sterling, probably.
Yeah. So you were saying that, this has potential to kind of disappoint the fans because it might have come off something similar in the co-main. So let's talk about Amanda Lemos versus Zhang. So how are you seeing this going then?
Well, I mean, again, this to me all depends on Zhang's game plan. I mean, look, Lemos has a chance to win because she hits hard. She, for someone down at strawweight to get knockout victories, that shows you that she's a heavy hitter, because you don't get a huge amount of knockout victories down at strawweight, and she's got a few of them. She's got TKOs and KO finishes. I think Marina Rodriguez in her last fight, who's also a phenomenal striker, and there might have been someone before that she. Yeah, so she gets finishes in her fights, Lemos. So I think Zhang's best option here would be to take this to the ground. And Zhang's wrestling has massively improved ever since that second Rose fight where she was training with Henry Cejudo and stuff like that. I think her wrestling and her grappling has massively improved. And I think Zhang's best option will be to get this fight to the ground and to take it into deep waters. Lemos has never seen the championship rounds. If Zhang's like playing a defensively sound game, getting those takedowns and prioritizing position over submission, and this drags out and she wears on Lemos a bit, Lemos could get very, very, very tired very quickly. And, Lemos has only been to a decision twice in her 9 UFC fights. She's either finished or she does the finishing. She's not someone that goes to decision very often. And I think, considering she barely goes to a decision in 3-round fights, Zhang's best thing is to let's take this in deep waters. Let's be really reserved. Let's be safe. Let's not make any silly mistakes. Let's drag this out and try and wear on her more in the later rounds. It does make her maybe more susceptible to that odd power strike, which Lemos can do. But I don't think Lemos has got anything Zhang hasn't seen before, other than maybe a bit more power. Like, I think she's been in there with Joanna. She's been in there with Rose twice as well. They're much more technical strikers. And so I think she should be able to deal with Lemos, even though she's got a bit more power than those people. And Zhang, yeah, I mean, Zhang's only lost. She lost her pro debut, and then she lost to Rose twice. I mean, she's not losing to mugs, is she?
No,
she
not at all. Like, wins over Torres and Raj first round, and obviously Joanna. I mean, I think the first fight was tight, but this, I mean, obviously when Joanna come back for the second one, just
was it spinning back fist knockout or something like that? Yeah,
and obviously, I mean, when you're rear naked choking Carla Esparza, when it's in that place, that's Carla's place of comfort. And she's losing. She shows that Zhang's so well rounded, and I thought that Rose Namajunas, the second fight, I thought that could have easily gone either way. And
it definitely could. Yeah.
But yeah, I think she's just way too well rounded, and I see this being possibly a submission.
Really,
in maybe sort of the sort of mid to late rounds.
I can see Zhang getting a finish in like round 4. I can see it, like, because I just think that Lemos doesn't have. She's not proven to have the gas tank and she just doesn't have the experience of those championship rounds. Probably wrong of me to say the gas tank. She's probably training, and I'm sure she is training for those 5 rounds, but she's not had to do it before in a big fight situation against someone the caliber of Zhang Weili. And so I just think it makes sense for the smart pick here to be Zhang Weili.
Absolutely. Okay.
Before we move on to the featured bout of Vera versus Munoz, should we chat very briefly about Gamcare?
Let's do that. So with we've kind of bucked what a lot of people do in sports content, and that's sort of align ourselves with a gambling company. We see so many of them, associated with lots of stuff in mixed martial arts, as well as obviously many other sports. And because it's something that Blake and I aren't comfortable with, we decided to sort of reach out and sort of do an alternative. And we should stress, this isn't for any kind of, there's no money involved in this. This is just something that we've done because we believe in this company and this charity and what they do. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's called GamCare. And do you want to sort of explain a little bit about what they do, Blake?
Yes, so GamCare are a charity that specialise in helping people with gambling addictions. They also help friends and family members of people with gambling addictions as well. And they have a 24/7 helpline that you can call day or night, 24/7. If you feel like you're someone that maybe could talk about an issue you might have with gambling, if it's affecting your relationships with family members, if you're in debt, if you're thinking about your paycheck coming in so that you can have a bet, or you're thinking about, you need to go to payday loans because you've just spent your paycheck on gambling sites, and now you're looking at payday loans so you can cover the bills, anything like that. That is signs of you potentially having, a gambling addiction, a gambling problem. And the idea of people with gambling problems being these 50, 60-year-old men down at the races or whatever, that's not the truth of it anymore. A lot of people with gambling issues are a lot of the demographic that would listen to this podcast and be fans of MMA. It's people in their kind of mid-20s, stuff like that, early mid-20s. They've got a lot of gambling issues now. They're using the apps, and even women as well on like the bingo sites and all those kinds of things. That any of those kinds of modern gambling things now, it's really changed what the kind of modern day gambling addict is. It is a lot of the time younger people on the apps, and GamCare can offer you completely free counseling sessions. As I mentioned, there's the 24/7 helpline as well. And if you're not comfortable with that, they have one of those instant messaging kind of chat box things. You can go on the website, talk to someone on an instant messaging chat thing, and hopefully get some help there and some advice there on how to best combat this addiction, because it can be a hugely negative thing. It can be really detrimental to your life, both financially, emotionally, your mental health, stress. All of those things can be deeply negatively impacted by gambling. So if you think you might be someone with an issue, or if you are the family member or a friend of someone that's got an issue and it could be affecting you, you could be stressed out thinking, God, my partner or brother or sister or parent or child is getting themselves into all this financial woe because they're in too deep into gambling. You can go to this place as well, get yourself some help, and maybe get some advice that hopefully you could use to help that person in your life that's struggling. The phone number, if you want to phone them, go on, Stu.
It's 0808 8020 133, and the website is gamcare.org.uk. And once again, the number 0808 8020 133.
Right. Let's crack on with Chito Vera versus Pedro Munoz. Now, you were mentioning earlier about Mirab. I think there's... Go on.
How I'm seeing the card, that's not the next fight.
Okay. Well, let's move on to this one anyway.
Okay.
Let's move on to this one here. What's at stake for Chito Vera here? I think there could be a lot at stake for him. If Chito Vera knocks out Pedro Munoz and Sean O'Malley beats Aljamain Sterling, I think there's a very big possibility that Chito leaps over Merab and fights for the belt next. I'm not saying that's what necessarily should happen. But think about it from a UFC perspective. Chito gets a knockout on the same card that O'Malley's on. Imagine Chito in the post-fight interview talking about his win over O'Malley. Then he goes and sits cage side for the O'Malley fight. And then maybe something happens backstage between the two of them. He goes looking for O'Malley just so that he can kick something up. Someone's recording it on their phone. Fans will clamor for it because people love Cheeto as well. And in terms of fight style, as much as Merab is fantastic, his fight style is not as exciting as Cheeto Vera's fight style.
100%.
So I think there is, and again, if you're Sean O'Malley, who do you want to fight in your first title defense if you win this fight? Do you want to fight Cheeto? Well, not just the guy that's beating you, but stylistically, do you want to fight a striker that's got terrible wrestling? Or do you want to fight the cardio wrestling machine that absolutely 50-45 Piotr Jan? You don't want to fight Merab. I don't think you want to fight that guy. You want to fight Cheeto Vera, not just to get it back, but also because it's a much better stylistic matchup for you. Yeah. So I think there's a world in which Cheeto Vera here has got a lot to fight for. And if he can get a knockout victory here, wins in style, I think he could definitely be looking at a title fight, especially if O'Malley beats Sterling.
Do you think that factored into his mindset when he took this fight? Because if he loses, I mean, that's not good. I mean, he's ranked. I'm sure he's ranked quite a lot higher than Pedro Munoz. And
it was supposed to be Cejudo.
Oh, of course it was. Of course it was.
It was supposed to be Henry Cejudo, which again
of course.
would have been a much bigger name for him and would have maybe catapulted him even more into the title picture had he won that one. But I would say Munoz is a better stylistic matchup for him than Cejudo, I think. Yeah. Because we've seen Cheeto just really struggle with the wrestling. We saw it against Sandhagen. Sandhagen became a wrestler, kind of mullered him a bit. Frankie Edgar, caused Cheeto a lot of problems. Was it up until he got knocked out, maybe? Did Frankie Edgar get knocked out by Cheeto? Was that a front kick?
Frankie Edgar seems to get knocked out by everybody at the moment, doesn't he?
God, yeah. I think it was, but I think in the first round, I think Cheeto really struggled with the wrestling of Frankie Edgar. And then, I think that there's a lot on the line for Cheeto here, and if he wins it, I think things could go very, very well for him, and it could upset Merab a lot.
Do you not think that Sandhagen gets the next shot?
Well, Dana White walked out of his last fight.
Do you know what? Right, we're big fans.
I'm a huge Sandhagen fan, but if Dana White walks out in the fourth round of your fight with Rob Font, torn tricep or not, I mean, I feel for Sandhagen. I'm a huge Sandhagen fan. We've had him on the show. But if Dana White walks out of your fight before the decision, halfway through round 4 or whatever it was meant to be, that doesn't bode well for you in terms of getting a title shot. I don't think that bodes well for you at all. I think Sandhagen deserves it. I think Sandhagen Merab should be maybe if Sterling wins and vacates, Merab Sandhagen should be the vacant title shot, in my opinion.
I completely agree with that.
But I just see a world in which Dana goes, no, fuck Sandhagen. He did a really boring fight last time. Don't want him to fight for a belt. I think that's very possible for the UFC to do that.
That's shitty, man. It's like, if that does roll that way, that is shitty because, Cheeto's a fan favourite and he does bring fireworks. And I know that makes for a much more exciting, like Cheeto rematching Sugar. I mean, Sugar's not going to win this Saturday, but if he did, that would be, a really fun fight to watch. But Sandhagen, Sugar, all over that. I think, and yeah, fighters have boring fights, and but the thing is, you ain't going to stand and box Rob Font. Why would you do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, but also he said he tore his tricep in round 1.
Absolutely.
And again, rather than walking out in the 4th round, what Dana could have done afterwards is talk about, look, I know that wasn't the most fun for the fans, but God, I mean, this guy that flying kneed Frankie Edgar and spinning heel kicked Marlon Moraes, this guy is now a legit wrestler as well. And with a torn tricep, he was able to hold down Rob Font and just sort of have his way with him at ease. This guy's a real problem for anyone in the division. And when he fixes his tricep, and if he's in a situation where he can strike someone, he's going to put on amazing performances again. You could do that, but that's not how the UFC stuff works a lot of the time. I mean, in terms of Munoz, he's not known for his wrestling. He's a decent grappler, but he's not known for his takedowns and his wrestling. Against Cheeto, I think that should be the game plan. Like, why risk those power shots that Cheeto lands? Which, again, when you look at the Cheeto Rob Font fight, Rob Font was dominating when it came to like strikes landed. It's just that Cheeto hit him with such power that he won the rounds by the damage. And why play that game if you're Munoz? Try and get those takedowns, try and wrestle. But we'll see what happens there.
It could be a really interesting fight, this.
Yeah, I think actually there's a lot of interesting fights on this card, but there's also a lot of possibility of there being a lot of lay and pray. Like, again, if you're Munoz's coach, you're saying lay and pray. If you're Zhang's coach, you might be saying lay and pray. If you're Aljamain Sterling's coach, you might be saying lay and pray. Like, the path to victory, and a lot of the easiest path to victory for a lot of fighters on this card, is utilize the wrestling and position over submission, because the fighters they're fighting against have showcased an inability to do well off their backs and stuff like that, maybe. So, yeah, I hope that it's going to be really fun and really interesting, and we're going to see some really great fights. I mean, if Munoz stands and strikes with Vera, that's going to be a cracking fight. If O'Malley's able to get back to his feet a lot against Sterling, that could be super interesting. Lemos and Zhang, if Zhang decides to strike with Lemos, wow, we could have a really cracking fight there. We could get a knockout win there for either of them. So, yeah, could be great, but equally, we don't know. There is possibility that it's not great.
Well, let's move.
Go on.
I was going to move to 170 now, because this is the card that I'm seeing placed above Cheeto, and I'm sure it potentially wasn't when two-time former guest of the show, Ian Gary, was fighting Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal pulled from the fight, and high on Ian Gary's wish list was always Neil Magny, the gatekeeper, and he's agreed. He's here. He's fighting Neil Magny. I think this is the fight that we're going to see Ian Gary show his skill set. I think we know that he's got insane speed, precision. You know, he obviously doesn't lack charisma. But I know when we saw him win the Cage Warriors strap against Jack Grant, and Jack Grant's very, very good wrestler. We saw Ian Gary completely comfortable there, and if anything, I mean, it was an empty York Hall. We could hear him. He was just talking to him. He was not phased by it. So I think we're going to see Ian Gary. You know, I think Neil Magny will try and tie him up quite a few times in this fight, and I think we're going to get to see. I don't know how much Ian Gary in the UFC, how much we've seen of Ian Gary on his back. I don't think any.
No.
So it's going to be interesting, because I think that could happen in this fight, and I think we're going to see how well-rounded Ian Gary is, because he's wrestling. You know, I know there's levels to mixed martial arts, and I'm taking nothing away from Jack Grant, but the Ian Gary we saw there was solid. But as we've then seen, you know, if you follow Ian on his socials, you know, he's training in gyms all over the world. He's going and getting every bit of experience. He's wrestling with the likes of, you know, Gilbert Burns daily, and so I think we're going to see a really interesting side of Ian Gary in this fight. This could be huge for him. I think if he beats the gatekeeper, gets himself in that top 10, then I think we're going to see him on an absolute tear after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because on one side, on Ian's side, you've got the fact that he was training for, you know, a good boxer with really heavy hands. And now, with 10 days notice or whatever it is, he's training for a very long, and I think Jeff Neal's a southpaw as well, and Neil Magny's orthodox. So there's the change there. Also, Neil Magny's very tall, long, rangy, very different type of striker. He's not got the heavy hands, but he has got volume, cardio for days. And as you said, implements the grappling, particularly up against the fence. I think of Neil Magny as the guy that likes to like grind you up against the fence and try and take you down, but he's quite comfortable just keeping you up against the fence. Couple of knees here, maybe an elbow, back to grappling you down to the wearing on you a lot. And it's a very, very, very different style to have to prepare for in a short time span of just 10 days. But equally, Neil Magny's come into this fight on 10 days and he's taking on an incredibly good striker who, I mean, I imagine Neil Magny with the cardio that he has can go 3 rounds at the drop of a hat. So, but it's still, he's not had a fight camp. So I don't know if, you know, you always got to say the guy who's had the fight camp is in a better position. Neil Magny without the fight camp, I don't know how well is he going to do. I'm not sure, but I certainly think that this, even though Neil Magny's only coming in on like 10 days notice, this is Ian's biggest fight to date. And I think I almost want to see him in a little bit of trouble. I want to see him win, but I think if he just gets a knockout of Magny, because Magny's not quite with it within like the first 2 minutes, I don't know that's going to tell me a huge amount about Ian's growth, but I don't doubt Ian's growth because, as you say, he's got this nomadic lifestyle now where he's going to Brazil over at Shooter Box. Then he's coming back to Florida and Killcliff and all that stuff. I think he's trained at Renegade a little bit over the last year or so as well in Birmingham with Leon and that. So this is a man that is going, as you say, all over the world, getting skills from everyone. I believe his evolution is going to become apparent and we're all going to see how good he's got, but I almost want to actually see it. And I'd like to see Magny have his way with him for a couple of minutes, you know, get him down or at least up against the fence and show Ian's takedown defense and show Ian being able to kind of ride those moments out and then get it back to the feet and get to the striking that Ian does so well, that distance management that he does so well. Just to, as I say, just to prove to everyone, this guy really is special, and he's an all-rounder now. He's not just a good striker.
You're going to have to see an A game on distance management against Neil Magny, because there's serious range there, and I'm interested to see. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying there, Blake. I think, you know, I'd like to see him. Was it his 3rd fight in the UFC? Engaged was quite a boring fight, and it was his 2nd or 3rd fight. And it wasn't a particularly interesting fight, and obviously since then he's had some much more comprehensive wins. And I think this is obviously the first. I mean, I think that both of them have got wins over. His last fight was Rodriguez, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I think Magny's got a win over Rodriguez as well. And so I think this is a really. I mean, I do feel sorry for Neil Magny because everybody just references him as a gatekeeper, and that's a shit place to be, man. Like, all you're doing is you're sitting on the cusp of the top 10, just having to fight absolute prospects, and like it's a lose. You beat someone that's like ranked 14th, 15th, and you're ranked 10th. Doesn't do you any favors, and like until you then get the guy that's ranked 12th, and you still don't. It's a shit place to be. And because you just got killer after killer
but he did just fight Gilbert Burns, who was like 3rd or something, and he got smashed pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that is I think we know what the ceiling is for Neil Magny. He's never going to fight for a belt unless some crazy stuff happens. But he's a really solid fighter, a really solid fighter that's going to be in and around that kind of like top, I don't know, 8 to 13, 14 range, probably for till the end of his career, because he is good and he's tricky to deal with.
I think he did come into the UFC in about 2011. I think that he was on the Ultimate Fighter.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I mean, that's a fair few years in the organisation, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope. I mean, we hear a lot about fighter pay and all that kind of stuff. I hope he is someone that's on a half decent wage and he's just fought for a long, long time and he sets himself up in a really nice way. Fingers crossed. You know, he's not going to be, you know, the huge star, the pay-per-view draw and the big money guy, but hopefully he's got something comfortable after so many years of service and being, what is it, the the most wins in the welterweight division as well now, as he surpassed GSP. Most wins in the welterweight division, I think.
Right.
So yeah, good, and it would be again a great name for E. Gary to have on his resume if he gets the win. Should we move on to Chris Weidman Tavares?
Yeah, I mean, there's not loads more on this card that I think massively exciting, and I don't think Chris Weidman is particularly an exciting fighter to watch. I mean, you're looking at his record now. Last fight was a loss to Uriah Hall, unanimous decision over Akhmedov, and then before that, losses to Reyes, Salazar, win over Gastelum, lost to Masasi, to Romero, to Rockhold. It's just, I don't get excited watching Chris Weidman fight. Yes, the silver thing will be on everybody's, greatest knockouts or upsets in UFC history. And then obviously the rematch was even more insane and horrific. But he seems like a lovely fella. And apart from that, I don't get excited watching Chris Weidman fight.
Well, you've stolen a little bit of what I was going to talk about there, but I have to say I do feel like that's a bit harsh because of the injury to Uriah Hall. I think it's so nice to see him back. When you think about how that checked kick and how mashed up his leg was, the break, it was horrific.
It's so mad, isn't it? That it's so weird, isn't it? Like
two of the worst leg breaks.
See that ever? Yeah. It's so rare, and the fact that he's involved in both of them, it's absolutely crazy.
It is crazy, and it was such a terrible injury, the one against Uriah Hall. So I wanted to come on here and be like, I'm so glad he's back. I'm really excited to see Weidman back. I'm really glad
you're not really excited to see Chris Weidman back. I don't believe you.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I wanted to come on to say.
Yeah.
I wanted to come on to say, because I am very happy that he's back for him. I'm happy for him that he's got over the injury and he's back. And I wish him all the best because it's such a nasty injury. And he does seem like a really nice bloke. He's a former champion. I want to see Weidman do well. I really want to see him do well. However, as you've just pointed out, when you look back at the career leading up to the injury, he hasn't really looked that great since 2015 when he lost the belt to Rockhold. I mean, he's like, you're going through, as you say, his resume. Suffered his first loss that night against Rockhold. He was undefeated, lost to Rockhold and lost the belt. And then went on a 3-fight losing streak, including the Rockhold one. Then he lost to Romero and he lost to Musasi. Gets one win against Kelvin Gastelum, but then loses to Jacare, loses to Dominic Reyes up at light heavyweight, wins against Akhmedov, but then breaks his leg against Hall. It's not amazing reading. And the other thing when you delve deep into it is that a lot of his losses were KO and TKO losses. And that makes you wonder about his chin, the age. He tried to move up to light heavyweight. Was it the weight cut doing something to him? And that just worries me for him. It really does worry me for him. So I don't know what kind of Weidman we're going to get back. Maybe, given all the knockouts he had, having the time off will suit him. Maybe his chin's recovered a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, I'm pleased for him, and I'm pleased that he's back and the leg is hopefully okay. But I am worried about Chris Weidman stepping in the cage. I don't know how old he is now. I'm guessing like 38 or something like that. And yeah, and it not looking good for him because it wasn't looking good for him ever since he lost the belt to Rockhold.
39.
39. Hey, you're not looking up Tavares, are you? Because I've got a little question for you.
I'm not, no.
No, don't look him up. Okay. So, how many fights do you think Tavares has had in the UFC? And Chris Weidman has had 17 UFC fights.
I remember him fighting Tom Kong Watson.
Okay, so
that's a long
this is where
time
your
ago.
age has come in handy.
This is a long time ago.
Yes.
I don't think I had grey hair then. Oh, blimey. 2010?
What? I said, how many fights has he had?
Oh, right.
He's had 2,010 fights. But basically, you are sort of on the right track, because I still think of Tavares sometimes as like a guy that's only been around for like 6 years or something like that.
I'm going to look it up.
Tavares, so Weidman's had 17 UFC fights. Brad Tavares has had 22 UFC fights. He started in the UFC in 2011. And not only that, but the second fight he had in the UFC was one of those ones that was named. Do you remember when they used to name them like Bad Blood, UFC Invincibles, or whatever it is? This one was UFC Resolution. That's how old Tavares is in fight years.
Do you think they changed that because they just run out of words?
Possibly. Very possibly. The thesaurus can only go so far.
UFC proper tear up. Like they must have just run out and we're just going, no, we can't go with proper tear up. But what can we go for? No,
they missed the trick on the UFC. Let them bang, bro.
I'll be all over that one.
Yeah.
UFC, who the fuck is that guy? Oh, dear.
Conceive, believe, achieve. Right. There's a couple of other fights on the card. Petrosky versus Meerschaert. I think it's a good fight for Petrosky. Came in through the Ultimate Fighter. Has looked really good. Good wrestler. But, I mean, we'll see. There's not a huge amount to say about that fight. If Petrosky wins, then, you know, he's someone that should be not necessarily getting a ranked guy next, but he's putting some wins together. I think he's on like a 3 or 4 fight win streak now. The only fight I think is really worth talking about, because I feel like sometimes, as we've seen with card placements and stuff like that, the female fighters don't always get the credit they deserve and the airtime they deserve. And we've got a ranked fighter in flyweight, Andrea Lee, taking on Natalia Silva. And I feel like that has to be mentioned, because it's not fair to put these ranked female fighters on prelims of cards and not be giving them any, you know, they're ranked. We should be talking about it. Their fights matter. They are ranked fighters. So Natalia Silva is someone that I think people maybe should start looking out for, especially if she wins this fight. She's on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC, 9-fight win streak overall. Got really fun style, taekwondo striking, absolutely dismantled Victoria Leonardo in her last fight in the first round. Leonardo just sort of crumbled with the strikes, kicks to the face, punches. She's really fast, Natalia Silva. She's got really quick taekwondo style. Very, very good to watch. Andrea Lee, on the other hand, on a 2-fight losing streak, but she's lost to good fighters. She's lost to Viviana Araujo.
Macy Barber.
No, Macy Barber, Araujo, you know, people that potentially one day could be fighting for belts. So nothing wrong with that. Lee goes to a lot of decisions, whether she wins or loses. And that's another thing. She's lost a lot of split decisions. And whenever it comes to split decisions, you go, well, did you really lose? Was it a bad decision, or is it just, it was just a super close fight? So I think Lee's record doesn't actually show how good she is.
Literally.
No, she's loads of decisions. And a lot of splits that went against her, which is, you know, that's a tough one. So I think she needs to take Silva down. Lee, you know, not an amazing grappler and wrestler, I don't think, but good enough. And she probably is looking at a discrepancy in her abilities in the striking to the taekwondo style of Silva. And she should have the better grappling, I would imagine. So the game plan has got to be to take Silva down. But this is a great test for Silva. If she comes through it, we could be looking at someone who's at least a top 10 fighter. And it's fun as well, that taekwondo style. If she can defend takedowns and keep fights on the feet, we'll be watching someone that is a really fun fighter to watch. And we all know that goes a long way. Look at Molly McCann, who we've just had an interview with Molly in person the other week. That's got released. As we're recording it, got released today. Check out our interview with Molly McCann. We were in person at the O2 as the launch of TNT Sports. It's very chatty in the background in the pub, which is annoying, but
I like it. I like it.
You like it? You think it's atmosphere, yeah?
Absolutely.
You like it? All right. Well, let's see who you agree with. Do you agree with me or do you agree with Stu? But it was lovely to chat to Molly. She spoke about the loss to Stoliarenko. She spoke about moving down to strawweight and also about her good friend Paddy Pimblett's injury and where he's at now. So we spoke a lot about that. But that is when you're an exciting fighter, the UFC will push you. They'll put you high up cards and they'll give you opportunities. And that could be what we're looking at in Natalia Silva.
Absolutely. While we're talking about upcoming episodes as well, and opportunities, an amazing opportunity has been thrown in the way of Oban Elliott, Cage Warriors fighter, to fight on the Contender season, which I think by the time this comes out, it'll be maybe just a week or so away. And we caught up with Oban, who's been on the show before. He's such a great guy to chat to. So subscribe to the podcast, and then you won't miss upcoming episodes. And I mean, it's impossible not for us to. I mean, we've been hyping it up for a while yet, but there's been so much kind of content and date sensitive stuff that we've been getting out. We've not had a chance to release it yet, so it's coming soon, and it is one of the best episodes I think we've ever recorded. And we got to sit in person with the legend that is Bruce Buffer, and that's coming soon.
Yep. And if you haven't checked out our episode for the Dana White Contender Series with George Hardwick yet either, Hardwick's fighting, I believe it's the 22nd of August. Is it maybe next week, Tuesday? He'll be fighting on the Contender Series.
Looks like he's out there already.
He's out there already.
We're recording this on the 14th, and he's I'm seeing on his socials that he just started his weight cut. There was pictures of him in a sort of wrapped up in his towels, having a sweat out, and then it cut to a picture of his brother Harry smashing a massive burger and fries in front of him.
I love the Hardwick brothers. Yeah, absolutely trolling his own brother before the biggest opportunity of his life. It doesn't get better than that. So please check out our episode with George Hardwick, which is already out. You go and check that out before George fights. If you don't know George Hardwick, he is the lightweight Cage Warriors champion and is now getting an opportunity to fight in the UFC if he wins on the Dana White Contender Series. Fantastic striker, loves a body shot. We're big fans of his. We've had him on the show a few times now. Please do check out that episode with George. We'll be releasing Oban's one before his Dana White Contender Series fight. Check that out as well. And as Stu said, a huge episode with Bruce Buffer coming your way. And Molly McCann's already out as well, so check that one out. Absolutely.
Just lastly, we've seen these UFC these Cage Warriors fighters getting their shot on the Contender Series. Somebody that's a Cage Warriors champ that has signed straight to the UFC is a guest that we had on 2 weeks ago, and that is Caelan Loughran, and that's a great chat to be enjoyed. So go and listen to our chat with Caelan over there. I think we're done for today, aren't we?
We're done. UFC 292 this Saturday. We'll be releasing a post-fight show next week for that once the dust has settled. And that's about it.
Subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe and stuff.
Do it. Right. See you soon.
Laters.